Audio Marks coming to you from the Sachem Public Library. Welcome to the Marks for Life podcast with your hosts, Jimmy, CJ, and Joe, the Shield of Wrestling podcast. Three casuals turned Marks wrestling fans to give you a direct line to all things in the squared circle. Enter the ring at your own risk. We pull no punches, we hit hard, and we will slam you with all the info you need to know. So, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? Because
it's Rusev Day!
And yes, it is. Welcome back to Marks for Life podcast, guys. I am your host, Jimmy. Unfortunately, I'm not joined by any of the other Marks. They unfortunately couldn't meet up this week. So this week I'm doing a solo one. I'm doing a solo minicast again. There's no problem with that. There is some big news. I can't go through with all of it only because it's a minicast. This week's been kind of rough, I think, on all of us. But hopefully by next week we'll get back into the swing of things. So let's get down to the two really big things I want to get through to this minicast. The first one is a very sour note, one that I kind of don't really like talking about, but I have to. And that's the three deaths that happened at the beginning of this week. Nikolai Volkov, Brickhouse Brown, and Brian Christopher. They all passed away, I believe, at various times at the weekend, but all been confirmed at the beginning of the week by Dave Meltzer, the Observer. And, you know, I wish I could say talk more about Volkov and Brown. I don't really know Brown that much at all, but I do believe he was a former heel, a pretty, roundabout stable heel in the really old days of WWF or WWF, I forget which one. And Nikolai Volkov I vaguely remember as like a heel who used to tag with the Iron Sheik and was also one half of the Bolsheviks, who faced against Hogan back in the 80s. But that's pretty much all I know about Volkov, and it really sucks because I do kind of remember, the one Soviet character and kind of like, that's the one geopolitical thing that, kids back in those days used to watch, with the anything involving the Soviet Union or whatever back in those days. The one I kind of know a lot more about and I'm a little bit more saddened by is by Brian Christopher, a.k.a. Brian Lawler, Jerry Lawler's son, a.k.a. Grandmaster Sexay of Too Cool. That one kind of sinks hard a little bit. I remember watching Too Cool, like in the early 2000s, in the late Attitude Era, with Rikishi and them dancing in the middle of the ring, kind of like popping the crowd. And that sucks, I remember watching Too Cool. They were a lot of fun. I could go back and, my brother used to show me all these videos on YouTube, like back when I was getting acquainted with wrestling. And man, Too Cool, man. They were the stuff. It really sucks. I'm really sad. I think I will speak for all of the Marks when I say that, all of our thoughts and prayers and, whatever kind of, emotional support, as fans, really, can give to, Jerry Lawler and his family. I know that was his son. I know that Brian Christopher struggled really hard with addiction, and, I take that shit really seriously. So, I hope he's in a better place now. He's no longer suffering, and that's really, hopefully, I hope everyone can, kind of agree to on that. I'm going to take just a quick break. Gather up the rest of my thoughts so I could talk about the one really incredible thing that happened on Monday Night Raw.
hello, Audio Marks. I am one of your Marks for Life podcast, so CJ, coming to talk to you about Patreon. Patreon is a place where you guys can go online and pledge your support to your favorite music artists, to your favorite artists, and even your favorite podcasts, like us. We at Marks for Life podcast have our own Patreon page, and we are always appreciative of our Marks for Life podcast pledges. So for only $1 a month, you too can also pledge your support to us. But that's not all. With $2 a month, you can get all of our podcast episodes as well as a special shout out from the Shield of Wrestling podcast, Jimmy, CJ, and Joe. And even further, you can get all of that with $3 a month plus a follow back on Twitter and Instagram. So, what are you guys waiting for? Head on over to Patreon at patreon.com. Search for us at Marks for Life Podcast. And we'll see you then, Audio Marks. Thank you very much. Back to the show.
All right, and we're back. Sorry, getting a little feedback on that. Apologize. The last thing I really want to talk to you guys about on this minicast is something kind of interesting happening on Monday Night Raw. Brock Lesnar showed up. Well, not just what happened with Brock Lesnar, but just kind of like the whole layup into like the very last moment. I'm gonna get to what I'm talking about in 1 second. You have Brock Lesnar showing up, and he's kind of like being, Brock Lesnar, being what Brock Lesnar is in WWE, a dick as usual, and kind of bossing around Paul. And it seems like there's gonna be a division. But the difference between this time and like the last time Paul ever like betrayed Brock was Paul kind of initiated the breakup with between him and Brock. Now it seems like, Brock is subtly pushing Heyman away, and, it's interesting in that sense. You kind of fast forward to the very end of the show where Kurt Angle is kind of like, I wouldn't say hassling, but demanding Paul to have Brock Lesnar come out, and actually represent, the company, represent WWE, be the champion that comes in day out, that fights for the title. And of course, Brock Lesnar doesn't initially show up, and Paul being just the absolute best heel in ever, which is why I love Paul Heyman personally. Just crawling and begging and pleading with Kurt not to be, fired or anything like that. And then Brock shows up, absolutely wastes Kurt Angle, scares the bejesus out of Baron Corbin, who just scurries out of the ring like a little bitch that he is. And then out of nowhere, well, not completely, because it's kind of like hinted at, but Brock then almost turns on, Paul, almost chokes him out in the thing. And the most bizarre part of that, out of the entire thing, is that the crowd started chanting, "We wanted Roman." Now, I'm not going to pour too much into, Vince McMahon just absolutely loving that in the back, just absolutely taking it in, going, "Ha ha, finally, I got him over." I'm not going to spin that into a whole thing, because I think it is an important step. I just don't know if that's going to, continue on into, like, the very smarky Brooklyn crowd that's going to happen at SummerSlam when, he gets the title. I believe from this moment until SummerSlam happens that Roman Reigns will win the belts. There's no denying that. My fear is that Vince is going to take this too far, and it's just going to shove Roman down our throats probably for the next 5 years, and I don't want that happening. And I don't think a lot of people want that. But, we'll see where this kind of leads. My hope is that, we kind of get past this hump. We get past, Roman being quote-unquote over, and then we'll see where it leads. As of right now, Braun Strowman still has a briefcase, so it's possible he could interject himself, whether that's in the match or post-match. But man, I will say that Monday night did show something interesting that I actually didn't expect, and that, there is a potential that, there could be finally cheers when it happens for Roman. My fear is that it's going to go too far, and I don't want that happening. But who knows? We'll see next week. Hopefully next week we'll get everyone on the pod, and, we'll get, a full roundabout view of it. That's my hope. But that's really it, guys. Thank you so much for, attempting to listen to this, about 10-minute episode, 11-minute episode. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone, for staying tuned to our podcast. Special shout out to the Sachem Public Library for the continued use of their equipment and space. Continue supporting us by rating and subscribing through Patreon, Audio Boom, Stitcher, TuneIn, CastBox, Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play Music, and Apple Podcasts at Marks for Life Podcast. And now, check out our YouTube channel, Marks for Life, for our podcast playlist and other content. Please follow us on our social media on Twitter at Marks for Life Pod, Instagram at Marks for Life Podcast, our Tumblr page, Marks for Life Podcast, and our Facebook page, Marks for Life Podcast. And email us at marksforlifepodcast@gmail.com for any questions, comments, or feedback. Until next time, Audio Marks.